In this video, I'm gonna tell you from my perspective what it's like to start and own a small business, as well as share a little bit about myself and who I am. So I'd probably start my story with probably the first business that I've ever started. When I was about 12 years old, is when I started my first business. And I started it while I was in school, elementary school, yes. And I realized during recess that all the kids in my class, they would go out to the canteen to buy food. Now, there was only one canteen for the whole school. So what would end up happening is everybody would just rush as soon as the bell rang for recess to try to get in line to buy food. They'd end up spending most, or if not all, of lunchtime or break time in line to be able to buy something. And more often than not, the line would be too big, and recess would end before they were actually able to buy anything for lunch. So they would end up not having lunch or just having what they brought from home, which was usually boring food. I think every kid just wants to, have some chips and have some junk food, right? And I noticed that. So a few days later, my mother baked a batch of what's called potato bread. It's pretty good. I know it sounds different, but it's pretty good. The dough is actually made from potatoes. And you get this cheese filling inside of it. It's really good. And so I put two and two together, right? So next day, what I did is I mentioned to my mom that I was thinking I could sell this. I told her I could sell this, and she, of course, said, "Why are you crazy? It's just a homemade bread. It wasn't something very nice looking. It was very good taste, but it wasn't pretty at all." But I told her, I said, "Listen, I've got nothing to lose." Even though they persisted and said, "Don't do that, don't do that," I actually, what I did is next day in school, I took two. They're actually round and they're small, about that size. They were about that size, yeah. So I took two of those to school, and I didn't normally eat lunch at school. I just eat lunch when I got back home. But whenever somebody actually got something, everybody would want a bite. So you pass the sandwich or whatever you always had to share it with your classmates, and that's just what I wanted. So as soon as they saw me about to eat that, they said, "Oh, can I try? Can I try?" I said, "Yeah, sure." So I let them eat it, and then I asked them, "Well, did you guys like it?" They're like, "Yeah, we loved it." And so I asked them, "Well, do you guys love it enough to buy it?" And yeah. So sure enough, next day I brought a bunch more home, and I started to sell potato bread in school. And that's the first business. That's the first time I ever made money for myself. And the funny thing is, I think entrepreneurs it's a mental state, it's a state of mind. I think you're either born with it or you're not. Because, see, what 99% of kids would have done, my age, just being 12 years old, maybe even younger, what they do is they probably get that money that they made and they buy something. They buy, I don't know, today a phone, the latest iPad, Nike sneakers or Gucci hat, whatever, I don't know. But instead of doing that, I actually got all that money and I bought more materials for making bread. I bought more potatoes, I bought more flour. I started doing home-to-home deliveries, actually. Even the teachers would buy my bread. And it just kept expanding until finally, a few weeks later, I was buying 50-kilo bags of potatoes and having to think about getting bigger machines to handle it. So in the beginning, my mother helped me, and she actually made the bread for me in the beginning. But at one point she says, listen, you're going to have to start to help me. You're going to have to learn to make your own bread from now on because it's too much work for me. I said, yeah, sure, fine, I'm happy with it. And that's generally, that's a small example of how a kid can make money. But it's actually, for me, it's been my business concept. And I think it's a very simple but effective concept for any business. I think that an entrepreneur is somebody that's always looking for opportunities. Not necessarily in one field, but more often than not in various fields, and that was me. I noticed that there was a demand for something and there was a shortage of a product. People weren't able to buy lunch, and so there was the demand, there was the need for that. And I realized that I could start that. I started in a small quantity, and I really believe in small businesses starting small without debt. I really believe and prefer that model. Today, Old Crow's Classic Cars has always operated without debt. I've never borrowed money. I've never had to borrow any money for this business or any of my other businesses. But yes, I mean, some business people view that in different ways. Like some people would consider getting a loan, but in my case, a loan was impossible. But it's always that general concept where you look at a shortage, you look at a need, and you find ways to solve it. You find ways to take care of it. So after that, unfortunately, I had to, and instead of using that money, I think that people make the mistake. A lot of people I see young people starting small businesses, selling chocolates or selling whatever, just for a certain purpose, and they don't realize that they can actually start a business from that. They can actually make quite a bit of money from that. And they take that money that they earned and they use it on something stupid, something that doesn't give you any return. When you buy a car, it loses value. A car doesn't have any value. When you buy a shirt, if you buy a shirt, a brand shirt, let's say you pay $300. I've seen people pay $300 for a shirt. The next day, it's worthless. It's not worth even half that. Phones. You buy a phone this year, next year, it's worth nothing. So people often make these mistakes because they want to take too much out of the business right away. But anyways, what ended up happening is me and my parents, my family moved somewhere else, and then I focused. I stopped the bread business and focused on studies alone. I decided that studying would be my mission until we finally moved again, and I got really disappointed with the education system. We finally moved to Canada, and I was really frustrated and upset at the education system there. And today, guys, education today is worthless. You have a lot of people today that have a diploma, they have a degree, and they're dumb. They're stupid people. They lack a basic level of knowledge, a basic understanding of logic, basic intelligence skills. The education system is very corrupt today. And that frustrated me. So I ended up giving up on that. I took 1 year of electrical engineering in university, and I dropped out. But education had always been my passion. Studying had always been my passion, rather, I should say. Today, education is not really educated. Education, for most people today, education is just memorizing a bunch of uh, procedures rather than actually developing your mental uh, potential. And that, for me, is what education truly is, developing mental potential. So I ended up giving up on university. I dropped out, not before writing a mathematics textbook. So I'm actually the writer of a mathematics textbook called Mathematics from Beginning to Infinity. It's actually available it's a published book. It's actually available on Amazon if you want to check it out. I'll try to post a link in the description as well. And that had been a life goal for me after I dropped out, because you see, most people, when you drop out, most people view you as a loser. They look at you and they're thinking, well, what the hell are you going to do with your life? You're doing something stupid, you're making a big mistake. And that's not how I wanted to be perceived, and that's not what I wanted to be. Even though I considered myself to be in a loser situation for a long time. I'll get to that in a bit. So one of my life goals had been to write and publish that mathematics textbook, because at the same time I was a dropout. I wasn't your regular dropout. I was an author dropout. And it's not a small book. It's actually pretty thick. It's 574 pages of pure mathematics, going up to post-university level mathematics. So for those of you that don't know, that's one of my, I've been away from mathematics for a while now.